It gives me great pleasure to introduce Alison Jacobson, who is the director of the Field Institute, a company that works globally with executive teams on strategy, disruption, and digital leadership training. Previously, Alison was at Dimension Data, so some of you might know quite well from there, where she launched the group's global digital advisory practice. She works across many sectors, coaching executives all over the world. And these sectors include pharma, education, IT, retail, FMCG, manufacturing, and financial services. And she coaches on customer-centric, data-driven strategy and works very closely with top execs in those areas. In the early part of her career, Alison founded and ran several e-learning companies, building both e-learning platforms as well as curricula and content. She's now also director of the Field Lab, the not-for-profit behind Rocket School, which many of you probably have heard about, which delivers an extracurricular program for kids, giving them a place to develop the critical skills they'll need to enter into and build tomorrow's workforce. So welcome, Alison Jacobson. As some of you might remember, she did a keynote for us a couple of workshops ago. So it's wonderful to see you. And thank you so much for joining us, Alison. Oh, you're on mute, Alison.
2021 and I'm still on mute. I'm going to share.
Welcome.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm really pleased actually to have listened to a little bit of what Lorata was saying, to have had that opportunity. And Lorata, I love your remain hungry. I certainly agree with that. And if I may, I'm going to call up some slides. Tell me when you can see them. Can you see my chimpanzee?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's my question for 2021. All right, great. So I hope I leave some time at the end for questions, and let's kick off. I'm going to move through quite a bit, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. I've been using this as an opening slide for a little while, actually, because obviously the topic that is sort of most close to my heart is disruption and strategy. And for some time, it's been the case that what has come before is no longer a sort of a great indicator of what's to come. But I think that that is more true now than ever. And, you know, if you look at the title that Haley gave me for this presentation around sort of reset and redefine and reimagine, we have great cause to do that, because I simply think that our before and after in the kind of great reset of 2020 is just going to make it so that whatever comes next is pretty unpredictable. You've even got people like the International Monetary Fund calling for a great reset. So this language is not only the remit of sort of disruptors and Silicon Valley and digital, you know, the International Monetary Fund calling for the great reset. I think that that was quite a thing. If I had to cite one source for this presentation, it would probably be Twitter, and that's where you're going to see a lot of my content has come from. And I think for me, there's a sort of a meta message in that I think Twitter is a very credible source of sort of zeitgeist. In fact, it almost is the metadata set for today's zeitgeist. And if you just take a look at this, that Flamin' Haystack posted on the 21st of May. And I think my point is that this will now be the case from here on out. Anybody that you say, including clients that I'm working with or that we're working with on a sort of strategy front, what's your 5-year strategy? We all increasingly know that it's a real set of opinions and hypotheses and projections into an incredibly uncertain and increasingly uncertain future. Where do you see yourselves 5 years from now? It's so difficult to predict. Somebody asked me if a new business they were entering into was a good bet, given the rise of AI. And I said, well, given that Elon Musk has said that AI is essentially going to achieve superhuman intelligence in 5 years, I'm not sure anything's a good bet. And of course, you know, Elon Musk does sometimes tend to overstretch, but on the other hand, he also overachieves quite dramatically. We'll talk a little bit more about him as we go. I like to refer to where we are now, 2021, as year zero, to really set the scene in our thinking for the fact that it is just different. And a lot of people, especially on the education and skills front, say to me in terms of job disruption, but we've had a first industrial revolution and a second, what's different, the fourth? And I think it is different. I don't think it's more of the same, and I don't think it's a sort of linear incremental gradation from first and second. I think we're now in exponential difference, which means that it's very difficult to project linearly from what was. So I like to think of us as 2021, the Great Reset, year zero. What does that mean? What does that mean we should do? And I liked a lot of the language that Lorata was using, which is around experimentation and just having sort of earnest integrity and trying different things. And what I'm wanting to do in my presentation for you today is to almost create a thinking framework for how we might try different things in the context of education and its disruption and as we disrupt ourselves. And to think about it not necessarily in terms of only one dimension, but multi-dimensional disruption. Let me go a little bit further and tell you what I mean by that. Before I get into the what should we do from an education perspective, I think it's important, given that I referenced jobs and jobs of the future and disruption, to just take a quick pause and think about the kinds of things that are happening today in our world and who we're trying to educate and what jobs we're trying to educate for and how we create eligibility in terms of a workforce, eligible for work, eligible for entrepreneurship, eligible to be a productive part, a contributing member of society in such an age. I'm not sure if, I don't want to get you guys all off mute, so I was going to ask, does anybody know what this picture is? I'll just give you a brief second. Think about it for yourselves. But what it is, it's not the moon. It's in fact a real image of a Japanese rover which touched down on an asteroid, a moving asteroid, hundreds of thousands of miles away from Earth. This asteroid, this rover was sent out actually in 2014, which is sort of so long ago in a way. So in 2014, the Japanese sent this out. And what you're going to see now is real live footage of their rover touching down on the asteroid. It shoots a little projectile into the asteroid surface so that it can collect sample asteroid material. And actually very recently, it brought this back to Earth and analysis is underway. So we've got scientists who are landing machines on moving asteroids and collecting samples. And the Japanese are not the only ones to have done this. NASA recently did this as well at the end of 2020. Watch this video. And in a way, a little bit closer to home, we all know about this guy who fairly recently topped the list of world's richest people, our own South African Elon Musk. And I'm not going to sort of belabor the point about all the kinds of things that he's doing. Suffice it to say, he's got his fingers in a number of pies and he's stretching the boundaries across all of them. Whether he's building Hyperloop tunnels underneath cities like Las Vegas and Los Angeles, or he is the first private business person to have sent astronauts on behalf of the US government into space to the International Space Station using his own private fleet, or that he was until recently one of the owners of Solar City, which is America's largest solar company, or that he's launched a company called Neuralink, which is basically creating an interface between artificial intelligence and the human brain. And he's got a number of different investments in a variety of other kinds of companies. But I really like what he had to say, which is that either he could watch it happen or he could be part of it. And I think that that's a really good philosophy because it's going to happen either way and there's no sort of getting around it. So what role do you wish to take as Gibbs faculty? And I know the answer because I've obviously spent time with quite a number of you, and I know that you're very forward-looking and that the impetus that has been created around COVID and the disruption and the need to break off into technology-enabled and sort of post-COVID into digital has fueled you. So I'm very excited by what I'm hearing in terms of your interest in ecosystems and partnering and experience, because it sounds to me that you're certainly voting with your feet in terms of being part of it rather than just watching it happen. Have a look at this video. Can you see the video playing?
We can't, Alison. It's not playing.
Interesting. I wonder what I can do about that. Okay, sorry.
There we go.
T-minus 20 seconds.
Stage 2 tanks pressing for flight. Flight computer has control of the vehicle.
Do we see anything on the sensors that's a problem?
Nothing right now. Nothing.
I'll say go for launch. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's good, baby. It's good. Come on, baby. Let's go. All right, side. What you got?
Speed 1.2 kilometers per second, downrange distance 11 kilometers.
Shortly after main engine cutoff, we're going to separate the stages and begin the second stage ignition.
Come on.
Main engine cutoff. The first stage is returning to land as the second stage powers the Orcom satellites to low Earth orbit. The fairings have successfully deployed. The first stage will soon begin a series of 3 burns to head back towards Cape Canaveral.
Okay, where's the... Okay, this is bad. Potentially bad. It's standing up. It's standing up. When we started coming in, it sounded like an explosion. Yeah, man. Oh my God. Look at this. Look at it. Look at it. It's just sitting there. Look at that. What? Holy smokes, man. It's kind of amazing that this window of opportunity is open for life to go beyond Earth. And we just don't know how long that window is going to be open. But the thing that gets me most fired up is that creating a self-sustaining civilization on Mars would be the greatest adventure ever in human history. It would be so exciting to wake up in the morning and think that that's what's happening.
I want you to remember the looks of the faces of those people. I don't think you'll forget very easily, and I'm going to reference it later on as we proceed. Can you still all see my owl now?
Yes, we can, Alison.
Great, sorry, just needing to check. All right, so back to us, back to education, back to disruptions. And I think that, in my opinion, there are 2 types of disruption in education and 2 things that we need to be mindful of. So what I'm going to talk about now is type 1 disruptions, which is basically still school of some kind or another. When we think about these, I like to think about what I call a wings model, where there are several dimensions, as I mentioned, to the possibility of disruption. And I heard Lorato talking about this too. You could disrupt the delivery model. You could, instead of delivering in a broadcast fashion in classrooms live, you could do the same over Zoom like we're doing here today. Or you could package that content and you could do voice over PowerPoint. or paper under glass, and you could send via email, even PDFs. So you could change the delivery model, which is something that we've been doing for a very long time. And in fact, since I started in e-learning in the early 90s, we were basically keeping pretty much everything the same, but instead of broadcasting it live from one person to another, we were sending it down the wire. We changed the delivery model. The next disruption is where we start to think about, hold on, we might need to actually change the curriculum. And why would we need to change the curriculum? Well, because of all the things I've just showed you about asteroid mining and Elon Musk. It seems that the world is changing, the future of jobs is changing, the future of skills needs to change with it, and we need to train different types of people to do different types of things. Or you could change the instructional design model. In other words, and I heard again Loretta talking about blended learning. So we could change the nature of what it is we think is going on inside a person's head while the process of learning unfolds, not just in front of them on the screen, but actually what kind of catalytic experience are we engendering, whether it's through simulations or role plays or any host of other possibilities in terms of how we might rethink the instructional design process. Because the paper under glass, the sort of sending a PDF, is simply not as effective as standing up in a classroom. So we're going to have to rethink the medium and reshape the message. And the final disruption, which I think is very interesting as it sort of unfolds around us in the world of education, is disruptions to the business model. I'm going to go through a couple of examples of each of these just to bring the point home. They're not mutually exclusive. So when I show you, for instance, what I mean by disruptions in delivery model, of course, in some of these examples, there are curriculum and instructional design changes too. But I'm pulling out the kind of dimension that I'm wanting to highlight. So in the first instance, if I talk to you about delivery model disruption, I think you're probably all very, very, very familiar with the brands that I have on the screen here. And I'd be very surprised if you hadn't yourselves gone through some of these courses. And if you haven't, I would strongly urge you to do so, because this was one of the earlier waves of disruption in the kind of education sector, not just at higher education level, but also at schools level with Khan Academy. So I'm going to take it as read that we've all seen this and that you get it. You can take higher education courses, they can be short courses, they can be full master's programs, and you could basically film the lecturers, have content to read on the screen, intersperse it with activities and sort of peer assignments, peer study groups, and allow these things to be delivered over the internet. This is no longer what I would deem to be disruptive. It's just the way that this is happening. And if you look at the statistics in terms of how many people are going through these things, how many people have taken it up, it's absolutely extraordinary in terms of numbers. And if you then argue that the drop-off rate is very high, I would say it is also for UNISA, and that may not be the point. Not everybody who's going into these short courses, and I'm a great example of that, I'm not there to get the certificate, I'm not even there to finish it. I'm there to get little chunks of information, and when I feel satisfied, I tend to drop out. That's what I'm after. And I'm not saying it's the same for anyone, but that speaks to the point of being student-centric and understanding what is the outcome that specific students are looking for and how do you best serve them. Who's there for the certification? Who's there for the experience? Who's there to network? Who's there to learn content, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think it's a one size fits all. And we're seeing increasingly, and I'm sure you yourselves are very well exposed to this, the rise of sort of nano courses and mobile learning and sort of super short, where it's bite-sized chunks of information that you're wanting, not necessarily longer degree programs. So enough said about the delivery model and Coursera. I don't want to go into more of that. What I'd like to talk to is some of the interesting changes that I'm seeing happening at the moment in terms of curriculum model. Why do we need a change in the curriculum? And I obviously talked to it in terms of the kinds of nature of the world of work and the technological innovation and sort of STEM and careers in STEM. But there's a very, very nice principle that actually John Hagel from the Deloitte Center from the Edge came up with, which I am borrowing here. His thesis is that companies used to win through scaled efficiency. So if you think of the age of mass production and the Industrial Revolution, anybody who could do it bigger, better, faster, cheaper en masse won. Today, companies are not winning only through scaled efficiency. That's table stakes, it's a given. Now they're winning through scaled learning, which is a very, very, very different muscle. And so anybody who can learn faster than anyone else Learn about what? Learn about the market, learn about customer, learn about customers' needs, buying patterns, intentions, desires, hopes, dreams. Anybody who can learn more and handle data in a way that leads to insights rather than just data overload wins. And there are so many examples of this now that I think are very well understood, from Google right through to everybody else in terms of Airbnb and Uber. Uber is a giant learning network. It learns about the availability of supply. It matches it with available demand. It learns in terms of routes and maps. It allows you to give feedback in terms of driver ratings so that it can learn about its own service levels without having to go out and run service quality inspections from a central source. So it learns from the crowd, it learns from us, we learn from each other. It's a giant set of sort of learning loops, and anybody who masters the scaled learning wins. So my question with respect to curriculum then is, what are we doing to shift the curriculum away from the Industrial Revolution style curriculum and something which is much more geared to scaled learning? And I don't only mean machine learning and data and analytics. I mean learning in terms of iterative experimentation and design thinking. And I am obviously aware that Gibbs is doing a lot on this front in terms of offering these programs, but embedding this into the very fabric of everything we do. How does Gibbs act as a scaled learning organization? When one part of Gibbs learns something about the market and your customers, or about innovation, and how does that propagate throughout the rest of Gibbs? Are you a scaled learning organization? And let me give you an example of one of your competitors who came onto the stage in South Africa and is dealing with scaled learning in a very interesting and quite fast growth way. And that is Explore Data Science Academy, which launched fairly recently in Cape Town, has now spread out to Johannesburg and also the UK. And essentially started by taking 8,000 applicants, whittling them down through a very rigorous selection process and accepting 100 people into a year-long data science training program that they built from scratch. Those applicants, some of them were degreed and some of them were actually just matriculants. And they found out that actually the matriculants on the whole fared better than the graduates in terms of their performance on these programs. These guys launched Explore Data Science. They were funded by Telkom BCX. They're now being funded by everybody and their cousins, including all of the banks who are all grasping for data scientists. And these guys actually can't keep up with demand. What are they doing? They're offering qualifications. They're also offering nano qualifications. They're also offering digital skills, bite-sized pieces. All of it is now available online. They had to pivot hard in terms of COVID because this was all done face-to-face in their training centers. And it's now fully online programs. And the kinds of courses, I think, are pretty great. Long courses, part-time and full-time, and short courses. And spoken to these guys quite a bit, that they literally can't keep up with demand on a kind of global scale. There is a sort of infinite hunger for these kinds of graduates. And what is very interesting to me in terms of scaled learning and their own learning organization behavior is they're tracking their graduates very, very carefully. And I think this is an important principle because what they're saying is, let's look at the outcome. So in 2019, they tracked 211 students. 93% completed the course successfully, which is an astonishing completion rate. 77 got employment. And of 85 students that they tracked for 12 months or longer, the average salary is 408,000 Rand with a total of 35 million Rand. That's into the South African market, 408,000 Rand annual salary from people who potentially prior to having gone to the Data Science Academy were just matriculants. I think that's an astonishing feat. If we talk about the instructional design model and the kinds of interesting trends that are afoot in this space, what I'd like to sort of put to you is that even very sort of complex topics, even topics that are very physical, because it's not all about programming and data science, so things like biology, you could now, right now, go onto the odin.com, go and buy yourself a DIY bacterial gene engineering CRISPR kit, or a genetic design starter kit with glowing jellyfish bacteria, or a bioengineering kit, which includes video lectures. And basically for $299, you can begin your own science lab in your kitchen and learn the basics of bioengineering. And there is no shortage of these kinds of things in pretty much every field, whether it's robotics or drones or bioengineering or computer programming, or basically almost anything that you can think of, where either freely available or at a very commoditized sort of relatively low cost. You can buy these kits, you can watch the videos, and I think I heard you all reference earlier, the content is no longer the rate limiting factor. The content is out there. It's how you assemble it into an experience and what you're offering as the outcome, which becomes the determinant of how strong a strategy this is. So the Odin.com, and this has been going for many years actually, bioengineering and biohacking at home in your kitchen. And another example, this Sean Puri is quite a famous sort of angel investor in Silicon Valley. Have a look at what he had to say. And an example that I've recently come across, a great example of asking beginners, is this program which runs in the United States, which is called GripTape. And we're working with them with Rocket School in South Africa. And GripTape basically sought to answer the question of, if you were going to design from scratch an educational offering for high school kids, what would it look like? So instead of positing that from an adult perspective and then trialing with kids, they started from the outside in, and they took approximately 2,000 high school kids and did basically design thinking type empathy interviews with them, and came up with the GripTape program, which essentially allows, I think the age is approximately 15, but gives them $500, access to an adult mentor or champion, and basically 10 weeks to go and pursue any aspect of learning that interests them whatsoever. Whether they want to learn welding or machine learning or Spanish dance or whatever it is, you get $500, you get 10 weeks to do it in. You've got to go and design your own learning program with your own milestones, with your own metrics and sort of achievement targets. And after 10 weeks, while being mentored by an adult champion, you've gone through the learning process. And the thing that they're finding is not so much that the kids are coming out after 10 weeks now being expert welders or data scientists or Spanish dancers, but that the kids are coming out resilient and confident and curious, and they have agency. They have agency and autonomy over their own learning, and they can see where they went wrong and what their mistakes were. And they basically, in the process of being asked to design the learning, learned more about themselves and what is possible than in an old paradigm where they would have been given curriculum content and spoon feeding. And so they've had extraordinary results in terms of the nature of change in these kids from a kind of meta skills perspective. And what I'd like to draw your attention to is, again, something I'm sure you're all familiar with, but the World Economic Forum initially published their 2020 jobs report. That's now been updated for the top 10 skills for 2025. And the kinds of skills that you would see here, which are not so easy to think about how we might embed into curriculum design and delivery models, and how we might embed into instructional design. But what we're looking for is the kind of thing that GripTape managed to achieve with their agency-based, autonomy-based learning programs. Can you help people develop resilience and stress tolerance and flexibility? Can you help them develop leadership and social influence and creativity and originality beyond science, technology, engineering, maths, literacy, etc.? These critical cross skills are the things that are sought after, because the domain expertise, the content knowledge can be taught. And if we're going to get into a world of relearning and constant job change and sort of gig economy, we can't necessarily say we're going to stay fixated on a particular topic, because we can't predict what those topics are going forward. But if you're able to inculcate these skills and help develop and emerge critical thinking and analysis and the ability to do complex problem solving, you've got a much better shot at building up somebody who has the confidence and the autonomy to learn and unlearn and relearn. Here's another example, also in the school sector. Elon Musk wasn't happy with the available choices of schools in the California schooling system. So at SpaceX, he started his own school. It's called Nova. And it was so effective that it's now branched off into a private program called Synthesis. And the thesis of this school is simulations, case studies, fabrication and design projects, labs, and corporate collaboratives. Nova develops students that are enthralled by complexity and solving for the unknown. What a great sentence. Imagine being able to help get kids to the point where they're enthralled by complexity and solving for the unknown. Or maybe the real answer is kids are born like that, and imagine not getting that knocked out of them. A school that children love. And in his own words, the more we can gamify the process of learning, the better. This has now become available. Synthesis school, ages 8 to 14, 1 hour weekly classes, $180 per month if you want to send your kid on this thing, which came out of SpaceX. Have a look at this video. This is their promotional video.
All right, everyone, have fun. We'll start the first game in about 5 minutes.
Nice to meet you guys. I'm Connor.
I'm Sarah. Caitlin.
Hi, Amelia.
I'm Samuel. Nick. I'm Marina. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, so what's the game plan?
So if we go here, we can connect all these good lines. Where's the other wormhole?
You have to go through this point.
This swirl all the way up into the circle here.
And you captured this?
This is a gamble. Nebula is more risky, but the outcome is better.
The best strategy was assigning people to the middle of the eye.
I was thinking about assigning player roles.
And then Connor and Amelia can build up here.
I think that will work.
Oh, I wanted to start already.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Somebody else got it.
So just start working where you guys are. You're doing awesome.
I'm evading yellow.
We're trying to block off magenta.
I
stole it.
No,
Magenta stole one of that power.
Magenta, so decisive.
Magenta somehow stole our headquarters. We need to get 22 HXVR, HT
44.
9X and N2 BHBGBF.
Okay, I connected to the star cluster.
No one's going for Nebula. Total backfire, actually.
We're winning in points. We need to keep this up. Red? Again? Wow.
We're just gonna have a mutual spec. Let red have that bottom part.
I got it!
We won!
Yeah! Wait,
That was
Steve.
Hey, good job, everybody. See you back for the main session. Great job.
Let's go! We lost.
What did those kids remind you of? Because to me, they reminded me of the people working for SpaceX in the video I showed you earlier with Elon Musk and launching the rocket for the first time that came back and landed safely. The same kind of enthusiasm, excitement, energy, engagement is the same kind of thing that I saw in the employees of SpaceX. And to me, that's really interesting.
Okay.
Now let's talk about business model. And like I said, none of this is mutually exclusive, because obviously you'd see business model disruption in the fact that you've got Coursera offering the kinds of programs it does. But I want to talk about something specifically. And I like what David Perrell, who's a writing instructor online, had to say about online course creation. Have a read of that. If we don't focus on our inputs and what content we're creating, but we focus on the experience, and I'll borrow the phrase again, catalytic experiences, we focus on the experience and we focus on the outcome, which means that we have to understand what is the outcome that people are looking for very specifically, and how do we serve against that outcome? And it's not a one size fits all. Just as a thought experiment, if I went to all of the students at Gibbs right now and said, you'll get a Gibbs qualification without going to Gibbs, do you want that? How many of them would say, sure? How many of them would say, definitely not? I want the experience of learning the content. How many would say, I don't want the content so much, I want the experience of being part of the university and meeting all of the students and faculty? And I don't know the answer, but I think it's important to sort of find out how that all shapes up and what is it specifically that people are after. Not what inputs are we providing, but what outcomes are they seeking. Here's a really good example of a business model disruption. which really is focused on the outcome. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Lambda School, but it is effectively an online coding academy that you pay absolutely nothing for until you graduate and get a job, earning at least $50,000 a year, at which point you start paying them back. So they have a success metric, which is that you only pay for your studies once your studies have helped you land a job. It's completely free up front. No, pay no tuition until you're hired. And this has become a very big deal, this Lambda School. I think they're branching out into India. And it's completely online. It always has been online. Some examples or some sort of snippets of what they're doing: remote, interactive, 2 intensive program schedules, either it's full-time or it's part-time. They designed their program with real hiring managers, keeping it highly, highly relevant, current in the moment. The curriculum development and instruction is led by experienced software engineers and data scientists, so very much people working in the field are behind this thing. And in the curriculum, you're going to be doing project-based work on real corporate, company projects. So it's not just theoretical, you're going to be working on real projects with real companies. You do build sprints. In addition to that, they've built, in terms of their blend, career coaching, industry mentors, access to instructors and other students. Not only do you get mentored, but when you are later in the program, you begin to mentor. So they've got a whole kind of 3-tiered peer mentorship program where you get mentored and then at some point you return the favor and you become a mentor. And in addition, they've got mental health support, various community support facilities. What is also interesting to me, similarly with Explore Data Science Academy, is how focused, how obsessed they are with outcome stats, which they would have to be because they need to see who gets employed in order to understand if their business model is viable. So they know very specifically what their graduation rate by program is. They know very specifically who was placed in a job. They know what position or what type of position their graduates got, whether they're paid internships, short-term, long-term, or salaried. And of course, they know what the salary distribution is. So for either computer scientists or for data scientists. I mentioned their peer mentorship program. They've actually developed now a fully fledged leadership program as part of the data science and programming track, so that you can identify gaps in knowledge and ask questions, deliver and receive feedback, collaborate with high professionalism, etc., etc. So in other words, they're not training only the guys who are going to end up doing coding, but the guys who are going to end up managing coders. So there's a leadership development track that runs within Lambda School. And now I just want to pause for a moment because there's a fork in the road. I said that the type 1 disruption is still a school, but we have disruptions in the delivery model, the curriculum model, the instructional design model, or the business model. But the next type of disruption is no longer a school. It's actually just business. And what do I mean by this? I liked what this person had to say a couple of days ago on Twitter. It's not that you need more information, you need to do more with it. And I think that's a very good strapline for this part of what I'm referring to in terms of don't go to school, just do business and get schooled along the way, is this philosophy. What's an example? Peter Thiel's probably one of the biggest investors and venture capitalists globally. He's worth about $5 to $6 billion, maybe that's actually more now. He was the first investor in Facebook. He was the first investor in Stripe. He was an early investor in SpaceX, and he was one of the founders of PayPal. And he decided quite a few years ago that he was going to approach kids at Ivy League universities in the United States and pay them $100,000 to drop out and start a business. Larry Summers, who was the president of Harvard University, called it the most misdirected piece of philanthropy ever in 2011. Well, subsequent to that, Harvard's still around, but Larry Summers isn't. he got a vote of no confidence from the Faculty of Arts and Science, and his tenure at Harvard ended. And I quite like what the Nightjar had to say. I just thought it was funny. Because what's happened, not to Larry Summers, but what's happened to the Thiel Fellowship is that 10 years later, the companies that they funded are worth $70 billion. And 99% of the founders say that they learned more at the fellowship than they would have in a classroom. That's serious stuff. Another example, which is very, very well known, Y Combinator. They started in 2005. Basically, if you make it into Y Combinator, you move to Silicon Valley for 3 months with your idea, with your startup. You work closely with the YC partners to get yourself into shape in order to get to the demo day, which is a pitch to investors. So over the course of the 3 months, they take you through a kind of startup accelerator. The kinds of companies that they've invested in include Airbnb, Dropbox, Stripe, Reddit, et cetera, et cetera. And the value of these companies is over $100 billion. And not only do you go through a 3-month accelerator where you get access to really top minds helping you to understand how to run your business and how to become more investable. This is the kind of companies that have made it. But they also have a startup school, which is a free online program for anybody, absolutely anywhere. And the kinds of curriculum, or kinds of content rather, courses that they offer range from how to prioritize your time, how to set KPIs and goals, what is product market fit, how to plan an MVP, how to find the right co-founder. And it's a very, very compelling offering. And in the South African context, we see many of these incubators and accelerators, some of them quite well known, ORIC, Race Corp, et cetera, older, many starting up, big funds, lots of talent, take you through a program and basically help you get to the point where they're introducing you to a very, very hungry group of potential investors. And you've gotten yourself and your business into a position where you are potentially investable. And we see a lot of this happening all over the place globally, but there is so much activity on this front in South Africa as well. And it is an alternative to the traditional model of go to school. This is get schooled while doing your business. This is learning in the flow of work rather than stopping work to go and learn. And the same VC that I mentioned earlier, Sean Puri from Silicon Valley, is doing this kind of thing. And I see a tremendous amount of this as well online. So if you're a 14 to 21-year-old with a great idea, you can join his mastermind for makers. He's not even going to take equity in your business. You're just going to meet monthly with people who've actually done it, who've built up businesses with over 100 million users or $100 million in revenue. 5 of you will get together on a monthly basis for coaching sessions, basically free of charge. So much of this going on, I'm seeing it every day. These different VCs who've become billionaires, rolling funds, mastermind groups, etc. And for me, the sort of summary is we've got to kind of rethink what is the nature of what's possible, what's our role in it. And if we think about disruption, we have to extend ourselves away from thinking simply about channel and delivery model into thinking about the totality of our business model as Gibbs, the possibility of joining what we're doing from an academic point of view with accelerator programs, making those things not separate but coupled. Gibbs is obviously a hotbed for ideas around new business opportunities. So Gibbs having a kind of an investor rolling fund to me sounds like a really good idea. And I'm not the only one who's sort of trying to have a go at this. I was really interested in this tweet, which came out a little while ago, a couple of days. As far as I'm aware, Elon Musk didn't respond to him, but who knows? And who knows what happened in private, but interesting tweet. I wonder why he's waited until now to sort of come forward, but let's see if anything comes out of it. Really interesting. And I'd like to end on that front, and if we've got some time, listen to your comments and take questions. But first of all, let me just say thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed putting this proposal together. It gave me an opportunity to go and do research and consolidate my thinking so that I could hopefully present to you a framework for your thinking, which is coherent and hopefully interesting and of value to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. That was wonderful and very thought-provoking. I'm sorry, I've got a rubbish truck driving past my window as I'm speaking. As I say, always on point.
Don't be sorry. You're lucky you have that happening still.
I know, it's a good thing, exactly. There's a lot of support in the chat for you, and just everyone really thanking you and saying that it was a wonderful session. So thank you so much, Alison. And I loved your ending where you spoke about, what is the nature of what's out there and what's possible. And I think Gibbs is such a phenomenal platform to look into the future and being able to grasp and be able to grasp those opportunities. And I think a lot of what we're trying to think about in 2021, year zero, is how do we harness those opportunities and really leverage them. I'm going to open up for questions as you've suggested. Lots of thanks in the chat for you. Please, if anyone's got a question or comment that they would like to make, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself.
Alison, can I just ask you, that was an absolute knockout presentation. Go to the center of the edge between chaos and order, and maybe a comment or two, because Gibbs is a mature organization now. It's got lots of routines. It's pretty inwardly focused. Just talk about the friction. Now, I've often talked about frontier models where you have different phases, and we've now compressed the 0-1 into chaos and order. And any comments on that?
I think it's such a great question. And every time I speak to a different executive, and we're doing this globally in terms of our consulting work, and we're doing this across industries. So I don't care if you come from retail or education or pharma, it's the same problem statement, which is essentially, how do I keep the lights on? And how do I serve my current client base while making sure I'm still here tomorrow to serve tomorrow's client base? And we have exactly the same conversation with executive CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, who have to now run at 2 speeds. And in my opinion, there's only one way to do that. You have to maintain governance and compliance. You have to continue to derive revenue from your current product set. But at the same time, you have to seed your environment, your ecosystem, with considered experiments, and basically throw those up against the wall and see what sticks. And you have to do that in 2 ways. One, using what Lorato said, which is remain hungry and have that beginner's mindset, because nothing is going to come if we think we know the answer. That's not an experiment. And the second thing is you have to do it not on your payroll. And I'll say this very sort of straight. And those of you who've worked with me, you know that I'm very, very, very enthusiastic and very passionate about this space, about education. I love Gibbs. But you're going to have to rethink your model for what you are in the context of the broader ecosystem. You can get a lot more done if you don't think about doing it only on your headcount and on your payroll and with your budget. You have to think about leveraging, whether it's people like me or a million others who are able to execute together with you on your behalf in different interesting ways. You've got to extend the boundaries of what you think the definition of Gibbs is. And because I don't know the answer to that, and nor do you, you have to couch those as considered experiments, where you say, I have a hypothesis, and what I'm setting out to test is the following, and I'll know it's successful if that, and it won't be, but basically I'm here to learn. But you can't just say, I'm going to try a million things and call them experiments, and just think, well, if it doesn't work, what are you going to learn if it doesn't work? And what are you going to do differently next time? So the scientific method as applied to sort of educational advance or the advance of any business is a very interesting and tricky thing to get your head around. And Dave Snowden was the guy who sort of talked about the fact that when you're moving from one paradigm to another and you don't know what the future holds, which is obviously the case, you just basically have to have a set of considered experiments that you're going to go and consistent, and you've got to put a lot of backing behind them. I mean, this should be done at a level which is across the organization. So I don't think it should be one person's job to be saying, I'm the digital experimenter. I mean, it needs to happen on every quarter across all of your programs and areas of offering. What are the experiments? And I would want to see a kind of experiment roster from each part of the business to say, what are we going to try? What boundaries are we going to push? And like I said, Nick, I'm saying the same thing to CIOs in banks and everywhere else, because I don't see any other possibility. You can't back a 5-year plan for something that you don't understand or can't conceive of. You can only say we're going to take iterative steps into a very uncertain future and then pivot the hell out of it when it doesn't work.
Thanks very much. Lovely.
Alison, I saw a hand go up. Danielle, I think your hand was up. I don't know if you've loaded.
Thank you, Haley. I did actually, because Alison started addressing it because it was specifically related to, and Alison, it's nice to see you again. I was just thinking about your view around curriculum and the fact that we are sitting in this dichotomy or paradigm, so actually the tension between what our requirements are still and how they lag, and they will always lag. And we have this tension in academia, especially because that's where the rigor sits, and yet we have to manage the cutting edge. But you addressed this in this idea of the experiments and the moving between.
Yes,
I think
and
the
sorry,
difficulty though is how do you support people in the psychological journey then, Alison? Any thoughts you'd like to share around that as well?
Yeah, I think that what I want to say to you is the lag is maybe not as big as you think, because then you get guys like Sean Dipnell from Explore Data Science Academy popping onto the scene out of nowhere. And the next thing he's eaten, while you were lagging, he's opened offices in Joburg, Cape Town, the UK. And he's training the guys that could have otherwise been part of a Gibbs program. You know, where I even saw a headline sort of saying, you know, Cell C is having sort of financial trouble, but is nevertheless investing $5 million because the only way through it for any company is to improve their ability to learn at scale. So, you know,
and we have legislation mandating that. So we're actually so benefited by our country.
And by the way, I mean, Explore Data Science is also registering with the Council for Higher Education. So it's not sort of fringe, it's actually SACWA accredited. They're moving into,
wonderful.
So I guess the only point I'm making there is it's a lag until it's not, and then it's disastrous. And suddenly, you know, your sort of deal flow gets diminished because people are going elsewhere. And of course, you're sitting in a situation as Gibbs where if you're offering online, well, do they go to you or do they go elsewhere in the world? So it becomes very, very tricky in terms of what is your value proposition and what is your sweet spot. How do you help people psychologically? I do think that days like this, your faculty conference, I think it's a wonderful agenda. I'm so excited for you. So just an opportunity to reflect and to have you guys sort of do these experiments with people who are able to guide you and coach you, I think is great. But then I think that there needs to be a hard edge to this, which is setting targets. You know, not having an innovation unit necessarily only, but everybody is required to innovate. And where's that in terms of your performance contracts? And allowing people the kind of autonomy and creativity to come forward and say, what might innovation look like for me and my customers in my area? How do we actually contract to that? So don't just contract to the old numbers and compliance, what contract to the future.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dee. I think, and you had a question in the chat. I'm not sure if you perhaps would like to raise it. It's just some really interesting ideas coming through. I'm going to save the chat and we'll upload it for those of you who perhaps have missed some of the conversation. But Nick's talking about potentially partnering as faculty, pair up, one deliver, the other coach. And there's a lot of support about that. And then also looking at our hidden assets, Nick also raised it earlier around bringing some of our real top alumni back into the ecosystem. And leveraging Friends of Gibbs, our brand, our academic MOUs across other business schools, business networks, etc. So there's a lot coming through there. Ant, do you want to raise your question? Was it a question or was it a statement? Sorry.
It was a question. I was just asking if we protect the new initiatives enough, or if we, as Gibbs, tend to get caught in the old routines that Nick spoke about. So, yeah, it's more of it's not a rhetorical question, but it can hang. I don't need an answer.
Brilliant, thank you, Ant. Seth, your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you to Alison for again inspiring us, getting us to think about business and also social. And I think that's what struck me again about the reality of doing, work within an educational institution, but also being true to how we engage the learner, the social benefit of people. And some of the examples that you've pointed to, a long time ago, Muhammad Yunus kind of encapsulated this within the work of Danone. And, later on, I got to work some years ago with the Danone Ecosystem Development Fund. But it's being true to that benefit where your business idea, your educational idea can actually point to people. And the turnaround is that when it is that equitable and sustainable, it may have impact on profit, and happily so, and joyfully so. So I'm just encouraged again, but also it's thought-provoking because it does give you a clash around what is, equitable development, how do we develop business frameworks, and how do we keep people and, sustainability and equitability at the center of it all. Thank you.
So I just want to add another, you say sort of sustainability, equitability, eligibility. That's what I think your job is. You're trying to get people eligible for the future, eligible for the workforce, eligible for entrepreneurship. And the degree to which you help improve people's eligibility is, I think, a key metric.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Alison. Any further questions before we release Alison? Because I'm sure she's got lots of other things to do and is very busy. Anyone else would like to ask any further questions or make any comments? Great. As I've already said, Alison, a lot going on in the chat, so I'll definitely save that and share it with you. It's hard to keep track of it. Yeah.
I want to wish you guys all the best. I really, it's not a big deal, but obviously the whole of South Africa is relying on you. So good luck and off you go.
Not a big deal at all.
We're all relying on you, and I can't wait to see the outcome of your efforts because, not such a big deal, but the future's in your hands. So take care of us, take care of it, take care of yourselves. Remain hungry.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Alison. It was really fantastic, and it tied so beautifully into our faculty strategy. We've got those 4 C's, and one of them is curiosity. And I think we really need to think about how do we do more of that. And I want to say exacerbate, but I don't think it's the right word, but really amplify.
If I could leave you, sorry, Haley, with just one thing. If you were to, and this is from a sort of strategy, if you were to try and create metrics for those 4 C's and build them into everybody's
KPIs, workload models.
Now, what would a metric look like for curiosity? And you don't have to get these metrics right, you just have to get them going. Just because if those 4 C's are important to you, then we need to see how you might, measure whether you're getting them or not.
Absolutely. And I think that the experimentation roster is a great consideration, and that would be a good way to frame it as well. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alison. Wonderful to have you today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Right, so that brings to close our first half of our first day, and it's been a really great start, I think, to the workshop, and it's been wonderful to see the engagement and the interaction. So I think on that note, just a phenomenal talk by Alison, which is really got a lot of cogs working, mine certainly, and I'm sure many of yours as well. We can take a break for lunch. I'm sure you all need it, and you need a break from the screen as well. So we'll come back at 1:15. Please enjoy some time outside. It seems to have stopped raining. Get a bit of fresh air, do some good breathing, have a good snack to eat, and we'll be back at 1:15. Looking forward to seeing you then. Thank you. And you can sign on to this link or you can stay on. Either way, whatever is best for you.